Phyllis and I, Travis McKinney, could easily be described as a normal couple as far as likes and dislikes. She has her hobbies and aspirations, and mine are completely different. While I golf and write short stories, she does her craft making and is running for the at-large position on the city council. Unlike contests for state and national offices, which have budgets, running for a local seat is funded mostly by friends, family, and some shady characters looking for an advantage. She's pretty young compared to the old fogies currently taking bribes. As with any couple, we don't always agree and have different likes, dislikes, and pet peeves. As an example, I was bitten by a stray dog while playing Little League Baseball as an 11-year-old. To this day, the hair on my neck rises when I hear a dog growling. So I don't like dogs, but Phyllis does. Spiders and snakes don't bother me, but wasps do. On the other hand, Phyllis hates spiders, snakes, and anything else that skitters around on the floor. Want to hear someone acting like the end of the world is happening? Lister to Phyllis, if a mouse or a cockroach crosses her path, I'm supposed to do something. What is never clear, just get rid of it. And no teasing about it. We both love cats, but don't have one. Our travel schedules for work make it too tough to care for and feed them. Maybe somewhere down the road, our work-related travel will ease up. Who knows? Maybe there's a family in our future, but not until this election is over for sure. I work in accounting forensics, or following the money. My files are filled with information on some of life's cruelest perpetrators. They steal from those who can ill afford to be swindled. Phyllis does PR work for County General Hospital. She's been the face of their community outreach program. Since we aren't tied down, we've been known to take trips to warm places with beaches. We tend to stay in all-inclusive resorts that include an open bar. They make that part of it work by giving you pathetic service. If you seem to be tipping the scales in your favor, then plan on having your order slow-walked back to you. Nevertheless, I've gotten plastered more nights than not. It's a sticking point with Phyllis. My being zonked prevents her from having a good time. Whatever. I am there to escape the pressures of my job after all. To celebrate Phyllis's birthday, we enjoyed a quiet dinner at an upscale restaurant. We passed on the after-dinner treats and liquors to hurry home for some adult fun. Sensing that our week-long hiatus from intimacy might be over, Phyllis praised me. "Well, I'm glad to see you're ready to get back in the saddle." I encouraged Phyllis to take one of her ecstasy pills to enhance tonight's activities. While in Mexico, Phyllis always picks up some ecstasy for her and some blue pills for me. Both really enhance our enjoyment. Since we hadn't had intimacy since returning home from our vacation last weekend, Phyllis had that twinkle in her eye and gave me a big smile. I led Phyllis down the hall to our bedroom. Rose petals were scattered on the bed. A feather to tickle her with. She's very ticklish and has used our safe word to get me to quit with the feather. She seems to derive pleasure from being rendered helpless. That's likely to change tonight. Phyllis scanned to the bedroom. "Oh, goody. Looks like I'm going to get a treat tonight." "Well, it is your birthday, and I thought I'd do it up right. Do what you need to do in the bathroom and take that pill. I'll be right back." She literally skipped with excitement into the bathroom. I headed to the garage to get my bag of goodies. Phyllis was waiting for me on the bed wearing nothing but a smile. "Flip over," was said calmly. "Be still, my heart. Something different tonight?" She giggled as she turned over onto her stomach. I took the first plush-lined restraint and gently secured her hands to the side bedposts. Normally, I would fasten them to the center of the headboard, but tonight was different. Her arms and legs would be fully extended. "Yeah, I read something interesting. Let's see what you think." With her wrists secured, I moved to her ankles, fastening one before quickly latching the other. "Trying something new tonight?" she teased. "I've got a few surprises for you." "What's our safe word?" Just in case I'm not a fan of this little experiment. Our safe words were always light-hearted, kitten or rainbow, something playful. But as I reached for the gag and slipped it over her head, she began to squirm. "Travis, what are you doing?" I leaned in, my voice steady. "Your safe word tonight is overnight sensation." Her body tensed instantly, eyes wide. "No, no!" Let's rewind a bit to the last weekend. Phyllis and I had booked a 4-day, 3-night getaway to Aruba. We arrived mid-afternoon on Thursday, and I drank way too much, passing out shortly after dinner. The following day, I was out cold even before dinner. Boy, did I feel like hell Saturday morning. No more drinking for me, and I told Phyllis that too. I was in the doghouse. Apparently, my getting drunk was ruining her vacation. To say Phyllis was angry is an understatement. Instead of waiting for me, she grabbed her tote bag and headed down to the beach without even a goodbye. I really didn't need to do much to get ready, so a minute later I was out the door. The elevators aren't very efficient, and I caught a glimpse of Phyllis in the jam-packed elevator as the doors closed. What I really saw was some guy who she'd been flirting with the first night give her a peck on the cheek and hand her an envelope. Rather than wait for the next elevator, I walked down the flights of stairs to the main level. Phyllis was walking slowly towards the beach exit, reading a note. As she left the building, she crumpled the paper and tossed it in the trash can. As I reached the trash can, I did a little dumpster diving. It would change my life. The note read, "Phyllis, you have been an absolute overnight sensation these last 2 nights. The love was mind-blowing. Giving you so many excitement made me feel like a king. Too bad he's not going to be drinking today, or we could have spiked his drink again. I'll just have to wait to see you in Sacramento. Until we meet again, Vince's." And the jerk even left his phone number. Well, Vince, buddy, I will do what it takes to give you a mind-blowing experience. One you'll never forget. With my mind, stomach, and heart spinning, I sat on one of the benches and fumed. That deceitful woman. Once my rage cooled to something less than raving maniac, I headed to the front desk. After a large outlay of cash, the assistant manager looked over the security footage and showed me exactly what Phyllis had been up to the previous 2 nights. He warned me that if I went to the police, they wouldn't investigate. Nothing bad ever happens at their resort. The first night started with Phyllis and me sitting around a large table with about 10 people. I was downing the drinks and paying a little too much attention to one of the unaccompanied ladies. Phyllis was not pleased and began paying attention to the guy by her side, Vince, I assume. I was clearly drunk when Vince whispered something into her ear. She took my drink and handed it to him. A minute later, Phyllis was encouraging me to drink up. 15 minutes later, Phyllis and Vince were helping me into our room. Vince left 6 hours later in the early morning hours. On day 2, we were in beach chairs when Phyllis left to get us refills. She met up with Vince after getting our drinks. 15 minutes later, Phyllis and Vince were helping me into our room. Vince's friend left about 8 hours later. The rest of our trip was very contentious. I wanted to kill her, but that wasn't going to happen. I needed a plan before I did anything. Sitting around airports, for our return flights, I had lots of time to dwell on an appropriate revenge. I smiled a devious smile when something crawled into my mind. Back to the present night. Now, I don't mind an ex-wife taking a lover, but she wasn't my ex-wife yet. If you're going to mess around, have the decency to get divorced first. After tonight, I think she'll be filing for divorce. Just a guess. When the ball gag snapped into place, there were no more understandable words from Phyllis. Lots of tears and unintelligible sounds. Reaching into my bag of goodies, I pulled out the Uranus silicone-based back lubricant. This stuff is supposed to be good. Okay, Phyllis, it's time for something different. After stuffing a few pillows under Phyllis, to lift up her back, panic set in. Phyllis was trying to break free as I jammed the lube past her rosebud. Her thrashing about actually made it a bit more exciting. Phyllis turned her head, but her furrowed brow and tears failed to move me. Time to implement my plan. Well, Phyllis, you seem to be enjoying this, but I've got an even bigger surprise for you for your birthday. Reaching into my shopping bag, I pulled out a covered mason jar with several cicadas and as many silverfish bugs in it. Making a big deal about it, I showed the jar to Phyllis. The bugs were moving around haphazardly. I continued, "Since your soul is stuffed up your back, I'm enlisting these little guys to clean the mess off of it." Phyllis was gurgling something and thrashing about, testing the strength of her restraints. Might have even sounded something like overnight. My Nonsense 101 lesson continued. Something you need to know about these bugs, Phyllis. Once they're in a warm, dark spot, they burrow under your skin and start laying eggs. Only about 10 eggs per day, but they hatch rather quickly. Of course, I'm going to stuff about a dozen bugs up your back so you do the math. That's a bunch of babies every day until you manage to poop them out. You'll feel them moving around almost immediately. The eggs are hard to detect even by medical professionals. Absolute terror had set in. I took one of the dark pillowcases off of a pillow and pulled it over Phyllis's head. Tough for her to see now. Going back to my bag of goodies, I put the jar of insects back and grabbed a mason jar with my little torture liquid in it. Phyllis could hear the jar being opened, mostly because I did it close to her ear. "Oh, these guys are creepy," pretending to be working with the bugs. The bugs were still safely in their jar. Instead, I dipped the back beads into my jar of liquid gel. Lube gel laced with prank itching powder. Some vague warning on the itching powder container about avoiding contact with just about every part of your body. Don't have the time nor the desire to read it. "Wait! Let's sing! Happy birthday to you! Happy birthday, dear cheating wife! Happy birthday to you! Here's your first present," as I plunged the beads into Phyllis's back. Giddy up as she was, jerking around just like a bucking bronco. With every imaginary bug, I'd give an ew or a yuck. One time I was just plain mean. Oops, one trying to escape. Back in you go, buddy. Plunge after a plunge of the beads as I pretended to stuff a dozen bugs in. Each plunge had another dose of itching powder-laced gel. After I was finished, I pulled yet another mason jar from my bag. This one was empty. All done, as I removed the pillow cover from Phyllis's head and displayed the empty mason jar. She was trying her best to break free. If this wasn't mean enough, I grabbed the feather and ran it up and down her feet and underarms for a few minutes. I should be filming this. Phyllis was doing a fantastic job of squeezing her back together. A little feather action on her rosebud, and I think I just pushed her over the top. I've never seen such a hate-filled, tear-stained look in my life. Oh well, you just never know how your spouse is going to react when they find out you've been cheating. "I'm going to go grab a beer. Back in a bit," I announced. In fact, I did grab a beer, then took the jar of bugs outside and released them back into the wild. I'd gotten a little of the itching power on my hand, and I've got to say that crap works. Even after some serious scrubbing, I was still itching my hand. Hand lotion seemed to help, if only just a bit. After about 30 minutes, I figured that Phyllis was about to go insane. The next part of my plan was likely going to get me battered and bruised. What the hell? I did another bout of using the feather. Protecting myself, I slowly released the restraining straps from Phyllis's ankles. Then, kneeling on her right hand, I released that strap, but didn't release her hand. Reaching over, I released her left hand, and then I leapt from the bed. Phyllis ripped to gag off as her other hand started poking away at her back. "You absolute jerk! I swear I'll make you pay for this!" she shouted, swinging the ball gag at me. For about a minute, I let her bite, kick, scratch, and flail on me. I deflected her attempts to damage my balls. Her itchy back needed some attention, so she paused to scratch away. With both of her hands busy trying to get imaginary bugs out of her back, I bear-hugged her and began the journey towards the front door. She was kicking my shins and gouging me with her nails. I could have easily injured her by tossing her down hard on the cement, but I wanted it to look like I was the innocent victim, so I pushed her away from me and jumped back into the house. Locking the door left Phyllis out with the moths and mosquitoes, naked as the day she was born. Ranting and raving, I might add. Quite loudly, too. All was captured on my phone, including her death threats. Time to call for help. 911, what's your emergency? My wife took some kind of pill and now she's threatening to kill me. I'm bleeding a little, but I was able to push her out of the house. She's talking crazy about bugs and babies and how I'm responsible. Please send over the paramedics because she's completely lost it. After confirming my address, I was told that officers and paramedics were responding. Looking out the window, I saw Phyllis scooting along the grass. kind of like a dog does when its butt itches. She was still screaming profanities and making no bones about how I was going to die. She was scratching her arms and legs now, too. Several of our neighbors were enjoying the show. The red and blue lights bounced off of the houses in the neighborhood, drawing out the deaf neighbors. All were getting a good look at Phyllis in all her glory. When she wouldn't stay still, as ordered by the officers, they tasered her. Once immobilized, they slapped the cuffs on. Of course, that prevented Phyllis from scratching her itch. The paramedics were told not to sedate her as they didn't know what kind of hallucinogenic Phyllis had taken. Strapped to a gurney, with her hands and feet restrained, Phyllis was telling them all about her ordeal. "My husband tied me up and stuffed bugs up my back, and they're having babies. They're crawling around. I can feel them. Get them out. I'm going to kill him." The responders just rolled their eyes, as they've probably seen nutcases worse than this. Off went Phyllis with the paramedics headed for County General Hospital. As part of giving my statement, the cops took pictures of my injuries. I told them of a night of activity and how Phyllis had taken ecstasy to enhance her excitement. Then she started talking crazy things and got violent. Told them she buys the pills in Mexico. Hook, line, and sinker. They left me to tend to my own injuries. Said they were required to arrest her for domestic violence. Withholding my consent makes no difference. Woohoo, an added bonus. Add to that, she was also being charged with resisting arrest. Toss in possession of a controlled substance and smuggling it into the county. Those last two are felonies. I had no idea. She'd been breaking the law for several years now. Wearing far more bandages than were called for, I drove down to County General to play the part of the curious and supportive husband. My hand still itched as I disposed of the goodie bag of mason jars, beads, and itching powder in the trash container by the hospital entrance. Emergency rooms being what they are, they don't bend over backward for a drug overdose nutcase. She was far down the triage tree. They'd drawn some blood trying to identify the drugs involved. She was still restrained. Whatever they'd administered in the IV had calmed her down. Well, at least until she saw me. Yeah, that earned her a bigger dose of chill out. When they wheeled her out, I was told they were going to do a CT scan to prove once and for all that she was not infested with bugs. I acted concerned. It was probably close to midnight before the attending physician gave me an update. "Mr. McKinney, as best we can tell, your wife took ecstasy. We've never really seen a reaction like this. When the enema produced no foreign objects, we did a CT scan, which showed absolutely nothing unexpected in her colon or rectum. She scratched herself pretty severely back there. Every time we release a hand, she immediately starts scratching herself again, so we still have her restrained. Even after showing her the results, she's convinced that she can still feel bugs crawling around and having babies. We'll be keeping her overnight for observation. She's presently sedated, and hopefully when the ecstasy wears off, she'll be back to normal." "Is she still threatening to kill me? As you might expect, that is more than a little bothersome for me," I asked. "Yes. We've made notes in her charts. Like I said, we've never seen a reaction to ecstasy like this. I'm sorry." I shrugged my shoulders, went back into her room, and kissed her sleeping forehead. All for show. Normally, city council candidates don't get much press coverage, but they did take a shine to this ongoing circus. Somebody must have called that anonymous tip line before going to the hospital. City council candidate charged with domestic violence and resisting arrest. Possible illegal drug overdose involved. Held overnight for psychiatric evaluation. With the evidence from the paramedics, the hospital, and my video, it was a slam dunk to get a restraining order keeping Phyllis 500 feet away from me. I held off on filing for divorce, waiting to see how things played out. The wild guess is that she'll start the proceedings. Phyllis's parents visited her the next morning, and the ranting, raving, and death threats hadn't abated. I told them about the restraining order and her arrest. They understood and said she was still handcuffed to her bed. Normally, overdose victims would be released the next day, but with Phyllis's wild story about bugs and babies and constantly wanting to scratch her itch, they kept her 2 more nights. Guess it took that long for the itching mixture to be pooped away. Phyllis appeared before a judge. Bail was set high due to the drug smuggling charges, but she was bailed out by her parents. To nobody's surprise, I was served with divorce papers the following day. Of course, the press didn't have anything better to do, so they tried to get a statement out of me. Naturally, I wore way too many bandages. Mr. Travis, can you tell us about the events leading up to your wife's arrest? Well, Phyllis enjoys a little playful restraint, and after an intimate moment, I started teasing her with a feather. Out of nowhere, she completely lost control. The moment I freed her, she lashed out, biting and hitting me. I even asked the authorities not to press charges for domestic violence, but apparently that decision wasn't up to me. No further comments. Too much information? You have to love stories with dirty laundry. Phyllis showed up with the sheriff to gather some of her belongings. My attorney was only allowing her to take her clothing as everything else was subject to an asset split agreement in the divorce. I could tell that Phyllis wanted to say and do things to me, bad things, but with the sheriff watching her every move, all she could do was give me a very evil eye. I pretended to scratch my butt, which made her almost lose it. Phyllis lost the election. The press hounded her about her love life and mental breakdown. I imagine she's got the sharks circling again. Her private life became a hot topic, making her a subject of unwanted attention. As a result, she was reassigned to a desk job at the hospital. While they couldn't fire her outright, they no longer wanted her to be the public face of their institution. With the likelihood of Phyllis planning to give me a mind-blowing experience, I took a job overseas as quickly as I could find one. No reason to tempt the revenge gods. It also shielded me from questioning when a man named Vince from Sacramento had his bank and investment accounts emptied. Over $250,000, the story said. Thanks for the phone number, Vince. Those scam artists are willing to work freelance. I did send him a greeting card, high price to pay for an overnight sensation in Aruba. After a mental evaluation found Phyllis fit to stand trial, she pled no contest to the domestic violence charge. They dropped the resisting arrest charge. She plea bargained down the drug smuggling charges, but she was now a convicted felon. Not knowing you're breaking the law must have played a part in that deal. 60 days behind bars and lots of community service. The only thing Phyllis wanted to know in our Zoom mandatory divorce final meeting was, "Someday you'll have to tell me how you did it." Really? You aren't even sorry for trashing our marriage? I'm glad to be rid of you, I asked. You're a disgrace. Tell me about the bugs, she answered. There were no bugs. All I did was tickle you. You'll have to tell me why you did it. Just get a divorce instead of trashing your wedding vows. There were bugs. Just tell me, please, she pleaded. And that's how our marriage ended. I have no plans to move back to the States. If you'd have seen the look in Phyllis's eyes, you'd agree with me completely. I think she's got a bug up her back. I'm dating again with little interest in a long-term relationship. Commitments seem to have bugs that need to be worked out. All right, I'll quit with the bug references. I do wonder when Phyllis's back itches, whether she thinks the babies are hatching. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Daniel Hughes sat alone at the kitchen table, his calloused fingers wrapped around a cold beer bottle as he stared at the lipstick stain on Rachel's wine glass from the night before. The house was quiet. Too quiet for 7:30 on a Thursday evening. Once, she would have been here, asking about his day at the garage while dinner simmered on the stove. Now the kitchen felt like a museum of their former life. Each object a relic of something lost. Going out with the girls again, Rachel had announced that morning, barely looking up from her phone as she poured coffee. Her thumb moved across the screen with practiced efficiency. guarding whatever conversation held her attention more than her husband of 14 years. "That's 3 times this week," Daniel had observed, keeping his voice neutral. "So," she replied defensively, the sharpness coming quick. "Sarah's going through a rough patch with Tom. She needs support." Daniel had nodded, though last week it had been Jessica who needed support after a bad breakup. The week before that, someone named Miranda he'd never heard of. The names changed depending on the night. A rotating cast of alibis that never quite matched up. He took another pull from his beer and examined his hands. Permanent grease stains under the nails. Small scars from years of busted knuckles and slipped wrenches. These hands had built a life, fixed countless engines, held Rachel through miscarriages and her mother's death. Now they felt useless, unable to repair whatever had broken between them. The changes had started about a year ago, subtle as a slow leak in a brake line. New clothes appeared in her closet, silky blouses and fitted dresses she never wore for him. She joined a gym, but her schedule never seemed consistent. Her phone, once casually left on counters and nightstands, now lived in her hand or locked in her purse. "You're being paranoid," he'd told himself for months. This is what happens after 14 years. People change. But paranoia didn't explain the new perfume, something expensive and unfamiliar that clung to her clothes on those late nights. It didn't explain why she'd stopped wearing the anniversary necklace he'd saved 6 months to buy her, or why their bedroom had become a place where 2 strangers slept on opposite edges of a king-sized bed. Rachel emerged from the bedroom, and Daniel's chest tightened. She looked stunning in a black dress he'd never seen before, her auburn hair styled in soft waves that must have taken an hour to perfect. The earrings were new too, small diamonds that caught the light when she moved. "You look nice," he said. "Meaning it." "Thanks," she replied without meeting his eyes, busy checking her purse for keys, phone, wallet. "Don't wait up. Sarah wants to hit that new wine bar downtown, might be late." "Which one?" he asked, a pause barely noticeable. "Revolution, I think it's called," she answered. Daniel said nothing, just watched as she slipped on heels that seemed too high for a casual girls' night. He'd driven past Revolution yesterday. It was closed for renovations. Had been for 2 weeks. She moved toward him for the goodbye kiss, that obligatory peck that had replaced the lingering embraces of their early years. Her lips barely grazed his cheek, cool and efficient. The perfume hit him again, definitely not the vanilla scent he'd bought her for Christmas. "Have fun," he managed. "Thanks, hun," she replied. The endearment sounded hollow, like an actor forgetting to put feeling into their lines. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Daniel listened to her heels on the driveway, the car door slam, the engine starting. He moved to the window and watched the taillights disappear down their quiet street. She used to wave goodbye from the car. Now she didn't even look back. He returned to the kitchen table and his warming beer. The house settled around him with familiar creaks and sighs, but it felt different now, less like a home and more like a stage set for a marriage that only existed when they were both present to perform it. Daniel picked up his phone, thumb hovering over her contact. He could call, make up some excuse about forgetting what time she'd be home, but he knew she wouldn't answer. She never did anymore on girls' nights. As he sat in the gathering darkness of their kitchen, something shifted in Daniel Hughes. The patient acceptance that had defined him, the steady, reliable nature that made him a good husband and an excellent mechanic, hardened into something else. He was tired of questions without answers. Tired of pretending not to notice the distance between them growing wider with each passing day. Tomorrow, he decided he would stop wondering and start finding out the truth. Whatever it cost him, the package arrived at the garage during Daniel's lunch break on Friday, small and innocuous in its Amazon envelope. He signed for it with greasy fingers, his stomach tight with the knowledge of what lay inside. For 3 days, he'd researched GPS trackers with the same methodical attention he applied to diagnostic flowcharts for faulty transmissions. Battery life, signal strength, magnetic mounting options, every specification weighed and measured. "What's that?" Tommy, his young apprentice, asked through a mouthful of submarine sandwich. "Diagnostic equipment," Daniel replied, which wasn't entirely a lie. He was diagnosing something, just not an engine. The tracker was smaller than he'd expected, about the size of a matchbox, with a powerful magnetic base that would hold firm against any metal surface. The accompanying app promised real-time location updates, route history, and geofencing alerts. Tools for concerned parents and fleet managers, the website claimed. Nothing about suspicious husbands. That evening, Daniel waited until Rachel left for her yoga class, or wherever she actually went on Friday nights. He'd give her 20 minutes, enough time to be well clear of the neighborhood. The device felt heavy in his pocket as he walked to the driveway, heavier than its 2 ounces should allow. Her Camry sat in the fading sunlight, recently washed and waxed. Daniel had maintained this car for 8 years, changed its oil, rotated its tires, replaced the alternator last spring. He knew every inch of its undercarriage, which made the installation feel like an even greater violation. He slid under the rear bumper, flashlight between his teeth, and found the perfect spot. Tucked up behind the spare tire well where road spray wouldn't reach, but the signal could still transmit clearly. The magnet clicked against the metal with a soft thunk that sounded like finality. Back inside, Daniel downloaded the app and created an account with a throwaway email address. The setup was surprisingly simple, clearly designed for users without technical expertise. Within minutes, a blue dot appeared on his phone screen, stationary in their driveway. He watched it for a moment, this digital representation of his marriage, then slipped the phone into his pocket. Rachel returned 90 minutes later, yoga mat under her arm, wearing the same clothes she'd left in. But her hair was perfect, not a strand out of place, no sign of the ponytail she always wore to actual yoga classes. The mat looked pristine, unused. Good class? He asked from the couch. Great. Really centered, she replied, heading straight for the shower, taking her phone with her. That night, Daniel lay awake studying the app's history feature. The yoga studio was 15 minutes away, but she'd driven 25 minutes to a residential neighborhood in Riverside, parked for exactly 1 hour, then come home. The address meant nothing to him, yet. Over the following 3 weeks, Daniel developed a routine. Every morning, he'd check the overnight data to ensure the car hadn't moved. During work, he'd resist the urge to constantly monitor, limiting himself to lunch break reviews. But evenings when Rachel went out, those became his obsession. He'd sit in his recliner, beer in one hand, phone in the other, watching the blue dot navigate through the city. Restaurant parking lots that matched her stated destinations, followed by unexplained detours. Shopping centers where she'd park for hours but come home empty-handed. That same Riverside address appeared 4 more times. Though she never mentioned visiting anyone in that area, the data accumulated like evidence in a case he didn't want to prosecute. Screenshots filled a hidden folder on his phone. Patterns emerged. Thursdays were the longest nights, starting with legitimate destinations before diverging into mystery routes. The credit card statements he'd never bothered to review now showed charges that didn't align with her stated locations. A restaurant in Riverside when she was supposedly downtown. A gas station 40 miles away when she claimed to be shopping locally. You okay? Tommy asked one afternoon, catching Daniel staring at his phone instead of the brake job in front of him. You seem distracted lately. Just tired, Daniel replied, pocketing the phone. Rachel's been going out a lot. House feels empty. My girl did that for a while, Tommy offered carefully. Turned out she was planning a surprise party for me. Daniel forced a smile. Yeah, maybe that's it, he answered, knowing better. But he knew better. The tracker had become his window into a parallel life Rachel was living, one that existed in the spaces between her lies. Each notification felt like discovery and betrayal simultaneously. He was violating her privacy to uncover her violations of their marriage, a circular destruction that ate at him even as he couldn't stop. Exactly 3 weeks after installing the tracker on a Thursday evening, Rachel announced another girls' night. Sarah really needs us right now, she said, checking her makeup in the hallway mirror. Her divorce is getting ugly. Daniel wondered if Sarah even existed, or if she was just another fictional character in Rachel's elaborate performance. Where are you going? He asked. That new cocktail place downtown. Revolution should be open by now, she replied. He'd driven past Revolution yesterday. It was still closed for renovations, would be for another month according to the sign. Sounds fun, he said. Be safe, She kissed his cheek, that same cold, obligatory gesture, and left. Daniel was already pulling up the tracking app before her car left the driveway. For a moment, the dot moved toward downtown, and he wondered if maybe, this time, she'd told the truth. Then it turned east, away from the city, heading toward the interstate. Daniel set down his beer and leaned forward, watching the dot accelerate onto the highway. This was new. In 3 weeks of tracking, she'd never left the city limits. His heart hammered as the dot continued east, mile after mile, far beyond any reasonable girl's night destination. 40 miles. She was driving 40 miles away, deeper into rural territory, toward places Daniel hadn't been since high school fishing trips. He pulled up the satellite view, zooming in as the dot finally slowed, turned off the main road, and followed what looked like a private drive. The dot stopped moving. Daniel stared at the screen, at this point in the middle of nowhere that represented the end of his marriage. He screenshot the location, then opened a browser to search the address. His wife was 40 miles from home, at a lakeside cabin owned by someone named Michael Henley, and Daniel finally had a name for what he'd suspected all along. Daniel sat frozen in his recliner, staring at the blue dot that hadn't moved in 20 minutes. His beer had gone warm, forgotten in his left hand, while his right gripped the phone like a lifeline, or a weapon. The satellite image showed a modest cabin surrounded by trees, a private dock extending into the lake. The kind of place people went for romantic weekends, not girls' night out. Michael Henley. Daniel rolled the name around in his mind as he opened Facebook on his laptop. It took less than 5 minutes to find him, a contractor with his own construction company, Henley Custom Homes. The profile was public, filled with photos of job sites, expensive trucks, and a boat that probably cost more than Daniel made in a year. Divorced, according to his relationship status, as of 8 months ago. Originally from their town, but now living in Riverside, the same area where Rachel had made those unexplained visits over the past 3 weeks. The profile pictures showed a man who clearly took care of himself. Gym selfies, hiking photos, the kind of casual wealth that came from owning a successful business rather than working for one. 5 years younger than Daniel, with a full head of hair and the confident smile of someone who'd never spent a day under a car, covered in grease wondering how to make ends meet. Daniel clicked through more photos. There, a group shot from a charity golf tournament 4 months ago. Local business owners and their guests. He almost missed her in the background, partially hidden behind another woman. But there was Rachel, laughing at something, a glass of wine in her hand, standing just close enough to Michael to suggest intimacy without confirming it. The date matched with a weekend she'd supposedly spent visiting her sister in Columbus. Daniel had offered to go with her, but she'd insisted he'd be bored, that it was just girl talk and shopping. He'd actually been relieved, spent the weekend rebuilding a classic Mustang engine. More searching revealed Michael's Instagram, also public. Daniel scrolled through months of posts looking for any sign of Rachel. He found it in the details, a table set for 2 at an expensive steakhouse dated 2 weeks ago, the night Rachel had her book club. A sunset photo from an overlook Daniel recognized, posted on a Thursday when Rachel had worked late. Never her face, never anything definitive, but the timing lined up too perfectly to be coincidence. Daniel's mechanic brain kicked in, approaching this like a complex diagnostic problem. He created a spreadsheet, cross-referencing Rachel's stated locations with the GPS data and Michael's social media posts. The pattern was undeniable. Every girls' night corresponded with gaps in Michael's online activity. Every unexplained charge on their credit card matched the kinds of places Michael frequented. The Riverside address Rachel had visited 5 times in 3 weeks, Michael's home, confirmed by a photo of him standing in front of the same house 6 months ago. The blue dot still hadn't moved. Daniel stood, pacing the living room as rage and hurt battled for control. Part of him wanted to drive those 40 miles right now, kick down the door, confront them both. But the rational part, the part that had spent 3 weeks carefully gathering evidence, knew better. Confrontation would just lead to denials, tears, maybe temporary remorse before the pattern repeated. He forced himself to sit back down, to document everything. Screenshots of Michael's profiles, the GPS location, Credit card statements highlighted with suspicious charges. He uploaded everything to a cloud drive, creating a backup of the backup. When this ended up in divorce court, he'd need evidence. Indiana was a no-fault state, but adultery could still affect property division and alimony. The thought of lawyers and court proceedings made this real in a way that 3 weeks of suspicion hadn't. This wasn't just a rough patch or a midlife crisis. This was Rachel actively choosing another man, building an entire secret life, while Daniel played the fool at home. His phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Having so much fun." Sarah's finally laughing again. "Might be later than planned. Don't wait up. Love you." The casual cruelty of it took his breath away. She was lying naked in another man's bed. He was certain of that now, and still texting him these perfect little deceptions. The "love you" at the end felt like mockery. Daniel typed and deleted a dozen responses. Finally, he settled on, "Glad she's doing better. Be safe." He returned to studying Michael Henley, trying to understand what Rachel saw in him beyond the obvious money and looks. The man's posts revealed someone who lived large: expensive whiskey, cryptocurrency investments, motivational quotes about success and grinding. Everything Daniel wasn't. While Daniel fixed cars for working families, Michael built McMansions for the wealthy. While Daniel came home covered in honest sweat and motor oil, Michael probably smelled like expensive cologne and possibility. The tracker showed movement. Daniel watched the dot pull away from the cabin, beginning the 40-mile journey back toward home. He calculated the time. She'd need at least an hour to drive back, maybe stop somewhere to freshen up, make herself presentable. That gave him time to prepare. He walked to their bedroom, looking at it with fresh eyes. Their wedding photo on the dresser, both of them so young, so certain of their future together. Rachel's jewelry box filled with pieces he'd bought over the years, scrimping and saving for each birthday and anniversary. The bed they'd shared for 14 years, now contaminated by the knowledge of where she'd just been. Daniel pulled out a suitcase from the closet, then stopped. No, he wouldn't be the one to leave. This was his house too, paid for with his sweat and sacrifice. If anyone was leaving, it would be her. Instead, he went to the garage and grabbed his toolbox, bringing it to the spare bedroom. Inside, beneath wrenches and socket sets, he placed the folder of evidence he'd been compiling. The GPS tracker's existence would remain his secret for now, insurance against whatever lies she might tell. The blue dot was halfway home now. Daniel returned to his recliner, arranged himself as if he'd been dozing, TV on low volume playing some game he didn't care about. He needed to seem normal, unaware, the same trusting fool he'd been for months. When Rachel's key turned in the lock at 12:47 a.m., Daniel had perfected his performance. He stirred as if just waking, blinking at her in the doorway. "Hey," he mumbled. "Have fun?" "Great time," she replied, not quite meeting his eyes. "Sarah's doing so much better. I'm going to shower and crash. Early meeting tomorrow." "Okay. Love you," he said. "Love you too," she answered. The words meant nothing now, just sounds they made from habit. Daniel listened to the shower run, imagining her washing away the evidence of her betrayal, erasing Michael's touch with soap and hot water. When she finally slipped into bed, staying on her side, maintaining that careful distance between them, Daniel lay perfectly still. He'd discovered the truth, all 40 miles of it. Now he just had to decide what to do with it. But as sleep finally took him, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. Their marriage had driven past the point of repair, and no amount of diagnostic work could fix what Rachel had chosen to destroy. Tomorrow, he would start planning his response. Tonight, he would mourn the death of what they used to be, before GPS trackers and lakeside cabins, before Michael Henley and 40 miles of lies. The phone rang at 12:23 a.m., exactly 4 days after Daniel had watched the blue dot at Michael Henley's cabin. He'd been lying awake again, the insomnia now his nightly companion. The sharp electronic trill shattered the silence. "Hello?" Daniel's voice was rough with sleeplessness. "Mr. Hughes? This is Deputy Connor with the County Sheriff's Office. Are you the husband of Rachel Hughes?" the voice asked. The room seemed to tilt. "Yes, what's happened?" he responded. "Sir, there's been an incident. Your wife has been shot." She's being transported to County General. She's alive, but you need to get to the hospital immediately, the deputy explained. Daniel sat up, his mind struggling to process the words. Shot? How? Where? He asked. At a residence on Lake Chapel Road. Sir, I can't provide more details over the phone, but please come to the hospital. Ask for Detective Williams when you arrive, Deputy Connor instructed. Lake Chapel Road. Daniel knew exactly where that was. He'd stared at it on satellite images for 4 days. Michael Henley's cabin. He dressed mechanically, jeans and the first shirt he grabbed, his movements automatic while his mind raced. As he drove through empty streets toward County General, the scenarios played out: robbery, home invasion, a hunting accident. But deeper, in the part of himself that had been preparing for confrontation, he knew none of those were right. The emergency room was harsh fluorescent brightness after the dark drive. A nurse directed him to a waiting area where Detective Williams, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, met him with practiced sympathy. Mr. Hughes, I'm Detective Williams. Your wife is in surgery. The wound was serious, but the paramedics got to her in time. The doctors are optimistic, she explained. What happened? Daniel asked, keeping his voice steady, drawing on the same control that had let him pretend normalcy for 3 weeks and 4 days. Williams studied him carefully. There was a shooting at 4847 Lake Chapel Road. Your wife was found with a gunshot wound to the abdomen. A man named Michael Henley was pronounced dead at the scene, she reported. Daniel felt the words land but showed nothing. I don't understand. What was Rachel doing there? He asked. The detective's expression remained neutral. That's what we're trying to determine. Were you aware your wife knew Mr. Henley? She inquired. No, he replied. The lie came easily. Was it a robbery? We have someone in custody. Linda Henley, the victim's ex-wife. She's confessed to the shooting, Williams revealed. The waiting room seemed to spin slowly around Daniel. Another spouse, another betrayal, another person pushed past their breaking point. But Linda had brought a gun while Daniel had only brought a GPS tracker. Can you think of any reason your wife would be at Mr. Henley's residence at that hour? Williams asked, her tone suggesting she knew exactly why Rachel had been there. No, Daniel repeated. She said she was having drinks with friends downtown. Williams made a note. Mr. Hughes, I need to ask, where were you tonight? She questioned. Home. Asleep until you called, he answered. Can anyone verify that? She pressed. Daniel almost laughed at the irony. His alibi for the night his wife was shot was that he'd been home alone, abandoned again while she met her lover. No, I was alone, he replied. I'll need to ask you more questions later, but for now, you should know that your wife is receiving excellent care. The surgeon will update you as soon as possible, Williams concluded. Williams left him in the waiting room with its uncomfortable chairs and outdated magazines. Daniel sat perfectly still, processing this collision of his planned confrontation with someone else's violent resolution. An hour later, a woman was escorted past in handcuffs. Linda Henley looked exactly like what she was, a betrayed spouse who'd snapped. Her clothes were blood-spattered, her face puffy from crying, but her eyes held a terrible clarity. She looked directly at Daniel as she passed, and in that moment, they understood each other perfectly. They were members of the same horrible club, but she'd paid a much higher admission price. The surgeon appeared near dawn. Mr. Hughes, your wife is stable. The bullet damaged her liver and intestines, but we've repaired everything. She's very lucky. Another inch and it would have hit the hepatic artery, he explained. Can I see her? Daniel asked. She's asking for you, the surgeon replied. The ICU was a symphony of machines keeping broken people alive. Rachel looked small in the hospital bed, pale and fragile, connected to IVs and monitors. Her eyes opened when he entered, immediately filling with tears. Danny, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He pulled a chair beside the bed, studying her face. Even now, after everything, she was beautiful. But beauty wasn't enough anymore. I know about Michael, he said quietly. I've known for 3 weeks and 4 days. Her face crumpled. It didn't mean anything. I was going to end it. I was going to tell him that night that it was over, she pleaded. Another lie, smooth and desperate. Daniel wondered if she even knew what truth was anymore. I tracked your car, he continued, his voice conversational. GPS device. I watched you drive to his cabin 4 nights ago. I know about all of it. Every girl's night for the past 3 weeks, every fake yoga class, every visit to his house in Riverside. I have screenshots, dates, times, everything. Danny, please. We can get through this. Couples therapy, whatever you want. I love you. I never stopped loving you, she begged. You were in another man's bed when his ex-wife shot you both. He's dead, Rachel. A man is dead because of choices you made, he stated. That's not my fault, she exclaimed, the heart monitor spiking with her agitation. She was crazy. I didn't know. Linda Henley wasn't crazy, Daniel interrupted. She was betrayed, just like me. The only difference is she brought a gun and I brought divorce papers. He pulled the envelope from his jacket. He'd stopped at home to get them from his toolbox, along with all his documented evidence. I've already talked to a lawyer. The police report will show you were having an affair. Indiana's no fault, but adultery still matters for asset division. You'll get half of what's left after the lawyers are paid, but no alimony. The house is mine. I can prove I've made every payment from my account. Danny, you can't, not now. I almost died, she pleaded. You almost died in another man's bed. Michael is actually dead. Linda's going to prison. 3 lives destroyed because you couldn't end a marriage honestly, he replied coldly. Rachel tried to reach for his hand, but he pulled back. Please, 14 years, Danny, doesn't that mean anything? She asked desperately. It meant everything to me, but apparently it wasn't enough for you, he answered. A nurse entered, checking monitors and adjusting IV drips. She glanced between them, clearly sensing the tension. Mrs. Hughes needs rest, she said carefully. Daniel stood. I'm leaving. My lawyer will be in touch, he announced. Danny, wait, Rachel called out. He stopped at the door but didn't turn around. I spent 3 weeks and 4 days planning how to confront you. I had speeches prepared, dramatic revelations planned, but Linda Henley did all that for me. She gave you a scar you'll carry forever, a reminder of what your choices cost. Michael paid with his life. Linda paid with her freedom. You're paying with your marriage and your reputation. Everyone will know why you were shot, where you were. And me? I'm just walking away, he stated. He left her crying in the hospital bed, her pleas following him down the hallway. In the parking lot, dawn was breaking over the city. Daniel sat in his truck for a moment, then pulled out his phone and removed the tracking app. The blue dot disappeared from his screen forever. As he drove home, he passed early morning commuters starting their day, unaware of the drama that had unfolded overnight. The radio was already reporting the shooting. Love triangle turns deadly, the morning DJ announced with inappropriate enthusiasm. By noon, everyone would know. Rachel's carefully constructed lies would crumble under the weight of public scrutiny. Daniel pulled into his driveway as the sun fully rose. The house looked the same, but everything had changed. Inside, he made coffee and sat at the kitchen table where this had all started, staring at the space where Rachel's wine glass used to sit. His phone buzzed with texts, friends who'd heard the news. Tommy from the garage, Rachel's sister demanding to know what happened. He ignored them all. There would be time for explanations later. For now, Daniel Hughes sat in his empty kitchen, a free man for the first time in months. The GPS tracker had led him to the truth, but Linda Henley's violence had delivered a justice he could never have orchestrated. He felt no satisfaction, just a hollow relief that it was over. Michael was dead. Linda was in custody. Rachel was broken. And Daniel? Daniel was done. He'd chosen investigation over violence, truth over comfortable lies, and dignity over desperate attempts to save something already dead. The tracker had been his tool, patience his weapon, and now divorce would be his freedom. Sometimes the best revenge really was just walking away and letting people face the consequences of their choices. Linda had chosen a gun. Rachel had chosen deception. Michael had chosen another man's wife. Daniel chose himself, finally and completely. And that was worth more than 14 years of lies could ever be, was enough. 6 months later, Daniel Hughes stood in his garage, wrench in hand, rebuilding a 1969 Camaro engine. The afternoon sun slanted through the bay doors, and classic rock played from the old radio he'd finally fixed. His hands were steady, movements precise, the kind of focus that only came with peace of mind. The divorce had been finalized 2 months ago. As predicted, the police report documenting the circumstances of the shooting had made everything straightforward. Rachel's lawyer had tried to argue for alimony, citing her ongoing medical bills and emotional trauma, but the judge hadn't been sympathetic. Adultery documented by law enforcement carried weight, even in a no-fault state. Daniel kept the house, the garage, and most of their savings. Rachel got her car. He'd removed the GPS tracker before signing it over, tucking the device into his toolbox where it now served as a paperweight and reminder. She'd never know it had been there, would probably always wonder how he'd discovered the affair exactly 3 weeks and 4 days before the shooting. That small mystery was his to keep. "Boss, Mrs. Peterson's here for her Honda," Tommy called from the office. "Be right there," he replied. Daniel wiped his hands on a shop rag. The familiar ritual of transitioning from work to customer service. Mrs. Peterson was a regular, had been bringing her cars to him for a decade. She smiled when she saw him, but there was something different in her expression now, the careful sympathy reserved for people touched by scandal. Everyone knew. In a town this size, the shooting had been the biggest news in years. The trial had made the front page of the local paper, woman sentenced to 15 years in love triangle shooting. Linda Henley had pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter, accepting the plea deal rather than risk a murder conviction. During her statement, she detailed finding the GPS tracker on Michael's truck, following him to the cabin, seeing another woman's car, Rachel's car, in the driveway. The parallel wasn't lost on Daniel. They'd both used the same technology to uncover the same betrayal. But where Linda had brought a .38 revolver, Daniel had brought patience. Where she'd chosen violence, he'd chosen documentation. She was serving 15 years. He was rebuilding his life. "Running great now," Daniel told Mrs. Peterson, handing over her keys. "New alternator should last you another 100,000 miles. "You do such good work, Daniel." "Always have," she replied. She paused, then added quietly, "I'm glad you're doing well." After she left, Daniel returned to the Camaro. The engine was coming together beautifully, each part cleaned, checked, and installed with methodical precision. This was his meditation now. The resurrection of broken machines, the satisfaction of problems that could actually be solved with the right tools and knowledge. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Danny, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know I'm sorry. I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I destroyed everything good in my life. I loved you. I just lost my way. I hope someday you can forgive me." Our Daniel read it twice, then deleted it without responding. Rachel had moved to an apartment across town, close enough that people still saw her occasionally. She walked with a slight limp now, nerve damage from the shooting that would probably never fully heal. She worked at a dental office, having lost her previous job when the scandal broke. The woman who'd once glided through life in new dresses and diamonds now lived quietly, marked by choices that couldn't be undone. Michael Henley was buried in Riverside Cemetery. Daniel had driven past once, not to pay respects but to confirm the reality of it. A small headstone marked the end of a man who'd thought he could take whatever he wanted without consequences. His construction company had folded within weeks of his death, projects abandoned, workers scattered to other firms. The garage's landline rang. Daniel still kept it for older customers who refused to adapt to cell phones. It was a new customer, referred by someone who knew someone. Daniel scheduled the appointment, wrote it in the paper calendar he still preferred to digital alternatives. Business was good, actually better than before. There was something about being the wronged party in a scandal that generated sympathy business. As the sun began to set, Daniel closed up the garage and headed home. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, like opening windows in a room that had been closed too long. He'd removed the wedding photos but kept everything else. This was his space now, arranged exactly how he wanted it. He grabbed a beer and settled into his recliner, the same one where he'd spent those 3 weeks and 4 days tracking Rachel's movements. The TV remote was exactly where he'd left it. No one would move it. No one would complain about his choice of shows. No one would interrupt the comfortable silence he'd learned to appreciate. The GPS tracker caught his eye from its spot on the bookshelf, holding down some invoices. Such a small device to have revealed such devastating truth. He'd paid $40 for it on Amazon, and it had saved him from years of lies, maybe decades of deception. The best investment he'd ever made, though he'd never recommend it to anyone. Some tools were too dangerous for most people to handle safely. Daniel Hughes had fixed his marriage problem the only way it could be fixed, by ending it completely. Linda Henley had tried to fix hers with violence and was paying the price. Michael had paid with his life for thinking he could take what wasn't his. Rachel was paying with a lifetime of regret and a scar that would never let her forget. But Daniel had simply diagnosed the problem, documented the evidence, and walked away when someone else's violence made the confrontation unnecessary. He'd chosen truth over comfortable lies, evidence over emotion, and patience over passion. Now he lived alone in a house that felt more like home than it had in years. He worked with his hands, creating value from mechanical precision. He slept peacefully without wondering where anyone was or who they were with. His life was smaller, perhaps, quieter, certainly, but it was honest. The tracker sat on his shelf, a monument to the power of truth and the danger of deception. Sometimes the best repair was complete disassembly. Sometimes the only fix was accepting that something was broken beyond redemption. Daniel raised his beer in a silent toast to his empty living room, to GPS satellites orbiting overhead, to ex-wives learning to live with consequences, to dead men who'd learned too late that everything has a price. He was free, completely, finally, peacefully free. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.